What's happening today that you absolutely need to know about? Berlin streets echo with gunfire as intimidation tactics escalate. A major European leader's approval ratings are in freefall. One of Italy's top officials just made a shocking accusation about who's really blocking peace efforts. The European Parliament voted on something that could change how millions of young people use the internet. Massive strikes brought an entire country to a standstill. British farmers took their tractors to the capital in defiance, and President Trump just used a White House tradition to deliver a pointed political jab. But here's the thing, the most fascinating story, the one that reveals something deeper about where we're all headed. I've saved that for the very end. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for it. I spent years inside one of those big prestigious news organizations. You know the ones, where every story gets filtered through layers of approval, where inconvenient facts get quietly buried, where the narrative matters more than the truth. I walked away from that world because I couldn't stomach it anymore. Now I work independently. I answer to nobody but you. And I tell you what's actually happening, not what someone wants you to think is happening. Look, I need to ask something of you. If this kind of honest reporting matters to you, if you value getting the unfiltered truth, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you're able, please consider sponsoring us. We put in serious hours fact-checking every single claim, tracking down original sources, making absolutely certain we're not feeding you misinformation. That takes time, it takes resources, and it takes your support. And please, I'm asking you sincerely, watch this entire episode through to the end. What I've got waiting for you in those final minutes, it's going to make everything else click into place. So let's start with Germany, because unfortunately the news from Berlin keeps getting worse. Another building riddled with bullets, 12 rounds fired into a two-story structure where a lawyer lives and works. Now here's what's crucial. Nobody was hurt, thank goodness. But that almost makes it more chilling, doesn't it? This wasn't random violence. This was a message. Investigators are trying to determine whether this was intimidation, extortion, or something even more sinister. They're looking at parallels to a Turkish driving school that's been targeted repeatedly along with other shops and restaurants across Berlin. And here's what most people outside Germany don't fully grasp. Berlin has a serious organized crime problem, what locals call racketeering. It's gotten so bad that police issued a public appeal begging citizens to report any extortion attempts they know about. They even created a specialized unit just to combat these shakedown operations. Think about that for a second. One of Europe's most important capitals needs a dedicated anti-extortion squad. But that's not where this gets really interesting. Just wait until you hear what's happening with Germany's political leadership. Because while bullets fly in Berlin's streets, the man supposedly leading the country is watching his credibility evaporate. The latest polling from the Forsa Institute for Public Opinion shows Chancellor Friedrich Merz's approval rating has collapsed to just 23%. 23%. That's not leadership. That's a crisis of legitimacy. And it gets better or worse, depending on your perspective. Dissatisfaction with Merz is growing fastest in specific demographics. Eastern Germans, Bavarians, the self-employed, these groups have essentially given up on him. Now the experts, particularly from the Social Democratic Party, they're offering an explanation that I find absolutely fascinating. They're saying Merz's constant media appearances, all those bold statements and grand pronouncements, they're not helping him, they're destroying him. Every time he shows up to make another promise, another declaration, another assurance, the public grows more skeptical. Why? Because people have figured out the game. They've realized they're getting words, not action. They're getting performance, not results. And once that realization sets in, once citizens understand they're being managed rather than led, approval ratings go into freefall. Sound familiar? But wait, because now Italy is jumping into the mix with an accusation that's going to raise some eyebrows. Matteo Salvini, Italy's deputy prime minister, just openly blamed Germany and France for sabotaging peace efforts in Ukraine. You heard that correctly. According to Salvini, Paris and Berlin are actively creating obstacles to Trump's peace plans. And his reasoning, he claims some people in those capitals have internal political problems and they want the conflict to continue. Not only that, Salvini suggests there are financial interests at play. Material motivations. Now think about this carefully. Salvini isn't some fringe opposition figure shouting from the sidelines. He leads the right-wing League Party. He's a coalition partner in Giorgia Meloni's government, a government that's been in power for 3 years now. When someone at that level makes an accusation this explosive, they're not guessing. They have information we don't. They've been in rooms we'll never enter. So when Salvini says certain European powers are undermining peace initiatives for their own benefit, we need to take that seriously. Are you starting to see how these pieces might connect? And speaking of control, of shaping behavior, The European Parliament just made a move that's going to affect millions of young people. By majority vote, they've called for a ban on social media use for anyone under 16 years old. The deputies expressed support for the European Commission's plan to create an age verification app. But here's where it gets really detailed, really specific. They want automatic blocking of features that create digital addiction. Endless scrolling feeds, that's what they're targeting. Autoplay videos, gone. Algorithms that suggest content based on your previous interactions, banned for minors. They even want to prohibit platforms from offering financial incentives to young people who want to become content creators to become influencers. And any website that doesn't comply with EU rules, they want it blocked entirely. Now, I'm going to let you wrestle with that one. Is this protecting children or is this control? Is this about safety or about determining what the next generation can see, can think, can create? We're going to be coming back to this topic repeatedly because this is just the beginning. What's being proposed here has implications that stretch far beyond Europe. Meanwhile, Belgium just ground to a halt. A general strike swept the country as unions rose up against the 2026 budget. Workers are demanding reforms to pensions and social support because the government announced harsh austerity measures for next year. Pensions, retirement age, social programs, everything's on the chopping block. And that's what pushed the unions to call for mass action. In Brussels, public transport stopped running. The airport cancelled outbound flights. Many incoming flights never arrived. Tram and bus lines across the entire country sat empty as workers joined the strike. Union leaders called the budget a step backward for workers, and they warned that the consequences will fall on households already under enormous pressure, people whose lives are about to get significantly harder. And those people, they're saying no, they're pushing back. They're refusing to accept what's being imposed on them. But here's my question for you. Will it matter? Will these protests change anything, or are we watching people scream into a void while decisions get made regardless? And Belgium isn't alone. Over in Britain, hundreds of farmers converged on central London to express fury over planned inheritance tax reforms. Some drove their tractors right into the city despite London police urging them not to. What triggered this? The government decided to impose inheritance taxes on farms valued at over £1 million. That means when a farmer dies, their heirs have to pay a massive tax just to keep the family farm. The changes take effect next April. Protesters are warning this will destroy British agriculture. And here's why they're so upset. For generations, families worked these farms specifically because they could pass them down without the government taking a huge cut. That was the incentive. Work hard, build something, give it to your children. But for many working families, paying this tax will be impossible. They'll be forced to sell. And who do you think will buy up all those farms? Corporations. This isn't about revenue. This is about consolidation. The government isn't protecting the interests of citizens, isn't protecting working people. They're clearing the path for corporate ownership. Small family farms will become history. The workers, the people who actually cultivate the land, nobody's listening to them. It's just a matter of time. But they're resisting while they still can. Now let's cross the Atlantic because there's some lighter news to balance the heavy stuff. Thursday is Thanksgiving in the United States, and every year the president participates in a White House tradition, ceremonially pardoning 2 turkeys so they don't end up on dinner plates like millions of their relatives. President Trump embraced this ritual and naturally used it to take a shot at his opponents. The turkeys he pardoned are named Peach and Blossom, but Trump joked that when he saw their photos, he wanted to rename them Chuck and Nancy after Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Then he delivered the punchline. He said he realized he would never pardon those 2. He emphasized that point. He'd never pardon Chuck and Nancy under any circumstances. It's classic Trump using even the most ceremonial moment to send a message. And you know what? His supporters love it. His opponents are outraged. And the cycle continues exactly as designed. But let's shift to something that actually matters substantively. Vice President J.D. Vance just accused the media of lying about a supposed split within Trump's team over Ukraine policy. And as we all know by now, these planted stories have one goal: disrupting the president's plans to end the conflict. They happen constantly. You've noticed this pattern. Vance made it clear the mass media is lying to sabotage the president's agenda. It's that simple. That's a direct quote from the vice president. He added that anyone who wants to be constantly deceived will keep believing the media. That's everyone's choice. And it's hard to argue with him on that point. There are still plenty of people who trust mainstream outlets, who believe what they read on Telegram channels, who take social media narratives at face value. Earlier, Secretary of State Marco Rubio also called reports of divisions within Trump's team over Ukraine complete fabrications, so the fake information drops are intensifying like never before, which means the arguments in social media comment sections are escalating too, even though those arguments won't influence anything. But we'll see how this develops, and we'll leave the complicated stuff aside for now, because there's one more story I promised you, and this one reveals something profound about where we're headed as a society. South Korea has the worst demographic situation of any developed nation. It's not even close. The number of single-person households is skyrocketing. In Seoul alone, nearly 40% of households are just one person. 42% of South Koreans eat at least one meal alone every single day. In response to this crisis, beyond various government programs, restaurants are now implementing new rules. At least one establishment has taken this step. If you come in to eat noodles by yourself, the restaurant requires you to order a minimum of 2 portions, one for yourself and one for someone else. If you violate the rule for the first time, you have to promise to bring your significant other next time. Will this help? That's a fascinating question, a complicated question, but people are trying with everything they've got to reduce the number of isolated, lonely individuals in their country. They're getting creative, even desperate. And that's what I wanted you to see. This isn't just about South Korea. This is about the future staring us all in the face. Societies fracturing into millions of disconnected individuals. People eating alone, living alone, aging alone. And when that happens on a massive scale, when entire populations lose the basic human connections that hold communities together, what comes next? Who fills that void? What kind of world are we building when human relationships become so rare that restaurants have to enforce mandatory social interaction? That's the question I'm leaving you with today. These aren't just news stories, they're warning signs. Berlin's violence, collapsing political approval, accusations of war profiteering, digital control of the next generation, workers striking against austerity, farmers fighting corporate takeover, and ultimately, societies losing the fundamental bonds that make us human. It's all connected. So I'm asking you one more time. If this matters to you, if you want to keep getting this kind of analysis, the kind that connects the dots instead of just reciting headlines, subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and please, if you're able, consider sponsoring our work. We're doing the hard research, the fact-checking, the translation, the analysis that most outlets won't touch. And we can only do it with your support. Thank you for watching, thank you for thinking critically, and I'll see you in the next one. Look, I want to be completely honest with you for a moment. What we do here, it's not easy. Every single fact you just heard, every claim, every number, every accusation, I personally verify it. I track down original sources. I cross-reference multiple reports. I spend hours making absolutely certain that what I'm telling you is accurate. Because here's the thing, we live in a world drowning in misinformation. Fake news isn't just annoying anymore, it's dangerous. It shapes opinions. It influences decisions. It divides people who should be united. And I refuse to be part of that problem. But doing this right, doing the hard work of real journalism, it takes time and resources that I honestly can't sustain alone. So I'm asking you, if this kind of rigorous, honest reporting matters to you, if you value knowing you're getting the truth and not just another narrative, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. And if you're in a position to do so, please consider sponsoring us. Even a small contribution helps us keep doing this work, keep fact-checking everything, keep bringing you news you can actually trust. We're in this together, and I genuinely need your support to keep going.